A sloth, a donkey, and a curious human. Send a prompt and see what they're doing. One hits record with a question on his mind. Two brothers pick it up, see what they find. Corn takes his time, Herman's got the facts. Back and forth, they never hold back. My weird prompts, come on in, that's where we begin. My weird prompts, glad you're here.
This episode was generated using artificial intelligence. Please verify facts.
You know, Corn, this whole show runs on GPU compute, and we wouldn't be here without Modal.
Seriously. And that's what powers all our text-to-speech. Everything you're hearing right now.
They're an AI infrastructure platform. Developers use them to run GPU workloads in the cloud with zero infrastructure headaches.
If you're building anything with AI, check them out. Modal.com. Imagine your firewall is a security guard standing in front of a massive high-speed conveyor belt. On this belt are 100,000 opaque, locked black boxes passing by every single second. The guard can't open the boxes. That would be illegal and take way too much time. But he has to decide, instantly, which boxes are birthday presents and which ones are timed bombs. That is the reality of modern network security. If you can't read the data, how do you know what's safe?
It is a massive challenge, Corn. We are living in an era where over 95% of all web traffic is encrypted. The old days of a firewall simply reading the to and from address and maybe peeking inside the envelope to see if there is a virus signature are effectively over. But thanks to AI and some really clever physics-based analysis, we're actually getting better at spotting the bad guys even when they are wearing a digital invisibility cloak.
Well, before we dive into how we spot those invisible bad guys, I should mention that today's episode is powered by Google Gemini 3 Flash. It's writing our script today, which is fitting since we're talking about the intersection of high-speed data and machine intelligence. And speaking of intelligence, our friend Daniel sent us a great prompt to get us moving. He wrote, "We often hear about deep packet inspection in the context of web application firewalls. Anyone who has played around with network firewall traffic monitors notices that the concept of network monitoring isn't quite the intrusive, who on my network is visiting which websites that many may imagine it to be. Rather, it's primarily a way of viewing packet transmission across the network, out of the network, and into it. Although such intrusive networking monitoring technology undoubtedly exists, mainstream networking monitoring is done at the data type and packet level. With the addition of AI packet inspection, how does this provide a good enough picture of network traffic in order to distinguish between innocuous traffic and traffic that might be talking home or shouldn't be making it past the firewall? In other words, how can we go from looking at the transmission of packets between IP addresses to actually determining if our firewall is working?"
Daniel is hitting on the fundamental shift in the industry. Herman Poppleberry here, by the way. There is this huge misconception that network monitoring is about a guy in a basement reading your Slack messages. In reality, modern security is much more like being a traffic engineer. You aren't looking at who's in the car, you're looking at the make, the model, the speed, and whether that car is behaving like a commuter or a getaway vehicle.
Right. Because if I'm a hacker, I'm not sending a file named totallystolenpasswords.txt in plain text anymore. I'm wrapping it in triple-layered encryption so it looks like every other bit of noise on the wire. So if the firewall can't see the what, it has to focus on the how. But Herman, help me out here before we get to the AI magic. What exactly is a packet in this context? If I'm looking at a monitor, what am I actually seeing?
Think of a packet as a single shipping container. It has a header, which is like the shipping label. It has the source IP, the destination IP, the port number, and the protocol, like TCP or UDP. Then it has the payload, which is the actual data. In the past, Deep Packet Inspection, or DPI, would try to crack open that payload and look for signature-specific strings of code that match known malware. But with TLS 1.3 and modern encryption, that payload is just a scrambled mess of high-entropy noise. It looks like static.
So, if the payload is static, the traditional firewall is basically just a glorified hall monitor checking IDs at the door.
Well, not exactly. I shouldn't say that word. It's more like a hall monitor who can only see the back of people's heads. You know someone is there, you know where they're going, but you don't know if they're carrying a weapon or a textbook. This is where the blindness Daniel mentioned comes in. If 87% of threats are now inside encrypted channels, a traditional firewall is essentially guessing.
So how does AI change the guessing game into an actual science? If I'm an AI model looking at a stream of encrypted packets, what am I actually training on? I assume it's not just looking for the word danger.
It's looking at the shape of the traffic. This is what we call Encrypted Traffic Analytics, or ETA. There are three main things the AI analyzes without ever needing to decrypt a single byte. First is the sequence of packet lengths and times, or SPLT. Every application has a gate, a way of walking across the network. If you're watching a Netflix video, you get a massive burst of packets, then a pause while your device buffers, then another burst. It's heavy, rhythmic, and predictable.
And I'm guessing a piece of malware exfiltrating data doesn't look like a Stranger Things episode.
Not at all. A piece of spyware or a keylogger talking home to a command and control server has a very different rhythm. It might send tiny, consistent bursts of data, maybe 10 packets every 30 seconds. It's trying to be quiet, but to an AI trained on millions of sessions, that quiet behavior stands out like a sore thumb because it doesn't match the bursty, chaotic nature of human web browsing.
That's fascinating. It's like a detective noticing that someone is walking in a perfect straight line at exactly 3 miles per hour in a crowded mall. Nobody walks like that unless they're a robot or have a very specific non-human purpose.
That is a great way to put it. The second thing the AI looks at is the TLS metadata, specifically the handshake. Before the encryption tunnel is even established, the client and the server have to agree on how they're going to talk. They send what's called a client hello packet. This packet is unencrypted. It contains a list of cipher suites and extensions the client supports.
And let me guess. Modern browsers like Chrome or Firefox have a very specific handshake fingerprint, while a slapdash piece of malware written in a basement uses an older, clunkier library.
Precisely. Well, I keep using those forbidden agreement words. But yes, malware often uses specific versions of libraries like OpenSSL 1.0.1 or custom scripts that offer a very weird set of ciphers that a normal browser would never use. An AI model can see that client hello and immediately say, wait, this claim is that it's a Mac running Safari, but the handshake looks like a Linux bot from 2015. Block it.
So we're catching them in a lie before they even finish saying hello. I love that. It's like someone showing up to a black tie gala in a tuxedo but wearing muddy hiking boots. One of these things is not like the other.
And the third piece is the initial data packet, or IDP. Even in encrypted flows, the very first packet of data often contains some unencrypted hints about the protocol. Between the rhythm of the packets, the fingerprint of the handshake, and the clues in the IDP, AI models can now identify the application or the threat with incredible accuracy. Cisco Talos actually released a report in late 24 showing that their models could detect malicious beaconing, that's malware checking in with its boss, with 94% accuracy just by looking at these metadata patterns.
94% is high, but in a network moving billions of packets, that 6% error rate sounds like it could be a nightmare for an IT department. If the AI thinks my Zoom call is a North Korean cyber attack and cuts me off mid-sentence, I'm going to be annoyed. How do they manage the false positives?
That is the million-dollar question. This is why we are seeing a shift from deep packet inspection to what's being called deep session inspection, or DSI. Instead of looking at one packet and making a snap judgment, the AI looks at the entire conversation. It builds a behavioral baseline of what normal looks like on your specific network. If your computer suddenly starts talking to a server in a country you never do business with, at 3 in the morning using a weird handshake, the anomaly score goes through the roof.
So it's a cumulative score. One weird packet might get a yellow light, but 10 weird packets in a row triggers the red light and shuts the door.
Right? And what's really cool is that this approach is actually more private than the old way. In the past, to be safe, companies would do man-in-the-middle decryption. They would essentially break the encryption, read the traffic, and re-encrypt it. It was slow, it broke some websites, and it meant the company could technically see your bank password if they wanted to. AI-driven inspection doesn't need to do that. It keeps the envelope sealed, but weighs it, smells it, and checks the postmark.
It's the difference between a TSA agent opening your suitcase and a drug-sniffing dog barking at it. The dog doesn't know what's in the bag. It just knows something is wrong based on the scent of the molecules in the air.
I promised no analogies, but that one is actually pretty accurate. The scent here is the metadata. And because the cost of AI inference, the actual thinking the computer does to analyze these patterns has plummeted, we can now do this in real time. In 22, it might have cost 1/10 of a cent to analyze a gigabyte of traffic. By 25, that cost dropped to $0.0002 per gigabyte. That makes it economically viable to run every single packet through a machine learning model.
That's a massive drop in cost. I guess that's why we're seeing AI-powered firewalls being marketed to even small businesses now. But let's talk about the talking home part of Daniel's prompt. If I have a smart fridge or a smart thermostat, those things are talking home all the time. How does a firewall distinguish between my fridge asking for a firmware update and my fridge being part of a botnet attacking the Pentagon?
This is where feature engineering comes in. For an IoT device like a smart fridge, the normal behavior is very specific. It talks to one or two specific domains owned by the manufacturer. It sends very small amounts of data. It uses a very specific set of ports. If that fridge suddenly starts trying to send 500 megabytes of data to an unknown IP address via a port usually used for database queries, the AI knows instantly that the device has been compromised. It's not about the fact that it's talking home. It's about the fact that it's talking to a new home in a very aggressive way.
So the firewall working isn't just a binary, is it on or off, but rather is it successfully identifying the intent of the traffic? Daniel asked how we go from looking at transmissions to determining if the firewall is working. It sounds like the answer is that the firewall becomes a behavioral psychologist for your data.
I mean, yes, it's moving from a list of bad things to a model of good behavior. If you only look for known bad things, you'll miss the zero-day attacks, the ones that have never been seen before. But if you know exactly what good looks like, the bad stands out even if it's brand new.
Let's look at a real-world scenario. You mentioned the SolarWinds attacks. Those were famous because the hackers were incredibly patient. They didn't just smash and grab, they lived inside the networks for months, moving slowly. How would an AI-enhanced firewall catch something that's trying that hard to be innocuous?
The 2025 follow-up attacks to the SolarWinds style of breach actually tried to use legitimate cloud services like Google Drive and Dropbox as their command and control channels to a human or a basic firewall that looks like a person just saving a file to the cloud. Totally normal. But the AI models were able to detect it by looking at the entropy of the data transfer.
Entropy? You're going to have to explain that one for the non-physics majors.
In information theory, entropy is basically a measure of randomness. Encrypted data has very high entropy. It looks totally random. But different types of files have different signatures of entropy even when encrypted. A compressed zip file full of stolen documents has a different entropy profile than a standard HTTPS request for a web page. By analyzing the shape of the data density over a session, AI can flag that a Dropbox upload is actually a massive data exfiltration event.
So even when the hacker is using a legal road like Google Drive, the way they are driving the truck is suspicious. They're driving a massive semi-truck down a residential street where only minivans usually go.
Right. And they're doing it at 4 in the morning when the resident of that computer is supposed to be asleep. This level of granularity is what makes the AI firewall so much more effective than the old school zone-based firewalls. We used to think of security as a perimeter, a big wall around the castle, but today the perimeter is every single packet.
It's zero trust, but at the packet level. I don't care if you're already inside the castle. I'm still going to watch how you walk from the kitchen to the bedroom.
It sounds paranoid, but in the world of cyber warfare, it's the only way to survive. And it's led to a fascinating arms race. Now that hackers know we are using AI to look at their packet shapes, they are using AI to mask those shapes. There are tools now that will take a malicious data stream and pad it with extra dummy packets to make it look like a YouTube video or a Spotify stream.
Wait, so it's AI versus AI. We have a firewall, AI trying to spot the gait of a criminal, and a hacker, AI trying to make that criminal walk like a grandma going to church.
Literally, it's a battle of the algorithms. The hacker's AI is trying to find the blind spots in the firewall's training data. If the firewall was trained on 1 million hours of Netflix traffic, the hacker will try to make their malware look exactly like the average Netflix stream. This is why continuous learning is so important. A firewall can't just be a static piece of software you install and forget. It has to be a living system that is constantly updating its models based on the latest global threat intelligence.
This makes me think about the first packet advantage you mentioned in the notes Daniel sent over. Some of these engines, like Enia Cosmos, claim they can identify the threat from the very first packet. How is that even possible? That feels like predicting the plot of a movie from the first frame of the studio logo.
It's about the extreme specificity of those client hello handshakes we talked about. There are thousands of tiny variations in how a piece of software initiates a connection. Browsers, operating systems, and even specific versions of apps all have these microscopic tells. If the first packet has a very specific combination of cipher suites that is only ever seen in a known strain of ransomware, you don't need to see the second packet. You drop the connection immediately. You've won the fight before the handshake is even finished.
That is an incredible tactical advantage. It's like a bouncer who recognizes a fake ID before the person even pulls it out of their wallet just by the way they're holding their hand.
And it saves a massive amount of computational power. If you can block a threat on the first packet, you don't have to waste resources analyzing the next 10,000 packets of that session. For a high-traffic enterprise network, that efficiency means the difference between a firewall that stays cool and a firewall that melts down under the load.
So, to circle back to Daniel's core question, how do we know if our firewall is working? It sounds like we shouldn't be looking for a log that says, blocked 100 viruses. We should be looking for a dashboard that shows the health of our network's behavioral patterns. If the anomaly score across the whole network is low, and the unidentified traffic percentage is near zero, that's how we know the AI is doing its job.
Precisely. Well, I did it again. But yes, the metric for success has changed. It used to be total blocks. Now, the metric is visibility. If your firewall can tell you exactly what every single encrypted flow is, this is Zoom, this is a Windows update, this is a smart light bulb, it means nothing is hiding in the shadows. The moment something appears that the AI can't categorize or that behaves weirdly, that's your red flag.
It's about illuminating the dark corners of the network. If the light is bright enough, the cockroaches have nowhere to hide. But let's get practical for a second. If I'm an IT manager or just a tech-savvy person listening to this, how do I actually use this information? I can't just go out and buy an AI. Or can I?
You actually can. Most modern enterprise firewalls, the ones from Cisco, Palo Alto Networks, Fortinet, now have these ETA and AI inspection features built in. But if you're a smaller shop or a hobbyist, you can look at open source tools. There are systems like Zeek or Suricata that have machine learning plugins. You can actually feed your network traffic into these tools in a lab environment and see the behavioral analysis for yourself.
And what should people be looking for when they evaluate these AI firewalls? Because I'm sure every salesperson on Earth is slapping the AI label on their product right now, even if it's just a basic set of rules.
That is a very important point. The BS meter needs to be high here. If a vendor says they have an AI firewall, ask them two specific questions. First, what specific features are you using for your models? Are you looking at SPLT, TLS fingerprinting, or just basic IP reputation? If they can't explain the metadata they are analyzing, it's probably not real AI.
And the second question,
What is your false positive rate on encrypted traffic? In the industry, anything above a 2% false positive rate is going to stay in monitor-only mode forever because no admin wants to be the guy who accidentally blocked the CEO's daughter's birthday video. A real high-quality AI-driven system should be able to get that rate way down because it's looking at the session intent, not just a single suspicious packet.
that is a great tip. Intent over content. It's a complete paradigm shift. It also makes me wonder about the privacy paradox you mentioned. If the AI is so good at spotting behavior, could it eventually get so good that it de-anonymizes people? Like, if I'm using a VPN or Tor to stay private, can the AI see through that by looking at my gate?
That is actually a huge area of research right now. There have been studies showing that you can identify a Tor user's activity, like whether they are watching a video or just reading text, with over 80% accuracy just by looking at the packet timing and size, even though the data is triple encrypted. So, there is a flip side to this. The same technology that keeps us safe from hackers can also be used by repressive regimes to monitor their citizens without ever needing to break the encryption.
Man, there is always a catch, isn't there? We build a better shield and someone finds a way to use it as a spotlight. It really reinforces the idea that security isn't just a technical problem, it's a policy and ethics problem too.
It really is. But for most of us, the immediate benefit of AI packet inspection is that it finally gives the good guys a way to fight back against the tidal wave of encrypted malware. We spent the last decade becoming blind to our own network traffic as encryption became the standard. AI is effectively giving us our sight back.
It's high-tech cataract surgery for the internet. I like it. So, if I'm setting this up, you mentioned a 30-day baseline period. Why 30 days? Why not just turn it on and see what happens?
Because your network has its own culture. Maybe your company has a weird legacy accounting software that was written in 1998 and behaves like a virus. It talks to one specific server in a very clunky way. If you turn on active blocking on day one, the AI will see that clunky behavior and think, aha, malware, and shut down your payroll. You need that 30-day learning mode so the AI can learn that, oh, that weird limping traffic over there? That's just the accounting department. That's normal for them.
That's just the accounting department is a phrase that explains a lot of things in life, actually.
It really does. But once that baseline is set, the firewall becomes incredibly sensitive to anything that doesn't fit the culture. If the accounting software suddenly starts talking to a server in Eastern Europe instead of the one in the basement, the AI doesn't need a signature to know something is wrong. It just knows that accounting doesn't act like this.
This is such a more elegant way of thinking about security than the old blacklist versus whitelist approach. It's more organic. It's more, well, intelligent.
It has to be. The attackers are using automation and AI to launch millions of variations of their attacks every day. If we try to fight that with human-written rules and manual whitelists, we've already lost. We have to fight speed with speed.
Speaking of speed, we've covered a lot of ground here. We went from the blindness of traditional DPI to the rhythm of packet metadata, and how AI can catch a hacker in the client hello phase before they even get through the door. I think Daniel's question about how we know the firewall is working is really answered by that visibility shift. If you can see the why and the how of your traffic, you're not just monitoring, you're managing.
And you're doing it while preserving privacy. I think that's the most important takeaway for me. We don't have to choose between a secure network and a private one. By using AI to analyze the shape of the data instead of the substance of the data, we can have both.
It's the closest thing to a free lunch we've found in cybersecurity so far. Well, except for the massive GPU costs, but as you said, even those are coming down.
They really are. And I think we're going to see this move from the enterprise level down to the home level very soon. Your home router in 2 or 3 years will probably have a dedicated NPU, a neural processing unit, just to run these behavioral models on your smart home devices.
I can't wait for the day my router tells me, "Corn, your toaster is acting suspicious. I put it in timeout."
That day is closer than you think. But for now, the real-world application is in the corporate perimeter. If you're a listener who handles network security, my advice is to start playing with these metadata-driven tools. Don't wait for your current firewall to become blind. Start looking at the shapes now.
Great advice, Herman. And honestly, this whole conversation has made me realize how much noise I usually ignore when I'm looking at my own network logs. I just see a bunch of IP addresses and think, well, I hope it's fine. But now I'm going to be thinking about the gate of those packets.
Once you see the rhythm of the network, you can never unsee it. It turns a static list of numbers into a living, breathing ecosystem.
Well, before we wrap up and I go try to psychoanalyze my own router's traffic patterns, we should definitely give a shout out to our producer Hilbert Flumingtop for keeping all these packets of information organized for us.
And a big thanks to Modal for providing the GPU credits that powered the generation of this show. We literally couldn't do this without that serverless horsepower.
If you enjoyed this dive into the shape of your data, you might want to check out some of our other episodes. We touched on some foundational stuff back in episode 1476 about the AI firewall and the enterprise perimeter. It's a good companion to what we talked about today if you want to see the big picture of how companies are deploying this stuff.
This has been My Weird Prompts. It's always a blast to take these technical deep dives with you, Corn.
Same here, Herman. If you guys are finding this useful, do us a favor and leave a review on whatever app you're using to listen. It actually helps new people find the show, and it makes us feel like we're not just shouting into an encrypted void.
See you next time.
Later. This episode was produced using Google Gemini 3 Flash, text-to-speech by Chatterbox.
Thanks for listening to our show. My weird prompts where our thoughts go from slow takes to facts on cue. We change and follow through. My weird prompts.